Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about a major hurricane potential plus a tropical system heading into the Gulf, as well as an educational video on some of the terminology I use and some of the things that I look at on ways to predict weather systems. So if you do find value in this video, hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. First of all, this is the overall hazard map for this morning for August 31st. And look at all the green. This is the remnants of two tropical systems. This is the remnants of Nora that's dumping some very heavy rainfall. They got flash flood watches into southern parts of California, the entire state of Arizona, parts of New Mexico, southern Utah, as well as Colorado. And then here's the remnants of Ida, dumping some very heavy rain today, tomorrow, and going into finally leveling off on Thursday. But man, we got a lot of very heavy rain ahead as this continues lifting off into the northeast from Alabama to Tennessee to Kentucky to West Virginia to Virginia, all the way up the East Coast and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So some of these areas, I'm deeply concerned of a very excessive flash flooding event, especially late tonight into tomorrow, into parts of West Virginia, especially as we go into southern eastern parts of Pennsylvania. So let's take a look at what's happening in the tropics right now. So here's the latest satellite picture. You can definitely see the remnants of what is now kind of a low pressure system, tropical depression, low pressure system of Ida. There's the tailing bands still extending all the way down to the coast, pulling that deep tropical moisture inland. And it's got a lot to work with, but with that, as well as a frontal boundary, that's everything is going to come together over the next 2 days, dumping some very heavy rain in its wake. Here's actually Tropical Storm Kate. Now we had Julie in that form, but it's also extra tropical now that's out to sea. But we also have a very active wave out here coming off the coast of Africa. This thing already looks very impressive. This is not even a tropical system yet, but this will be Larry shortly, and a lot of indications has this going to a hurricane, if not a major hurricane, in just a short amount of time. But there's also an area of concern down here in the Caribbean. And you can definitely see this is just an area of disturbed weather right now. This is almost separated. This is what they call Central American gyre. It's actually not a tropical wave. This is a tropical wave. These are all together. This is just an area of kind of disturbed weather that's kind of slowly gets its act together over time. So what exactly is this Central American gyre? So all it basically is it's just an area of disturbed weather that blows counterclockwise, right? And around a broad area of low pressure. So over time, these things kind of develop in the rainy season where we are currently right now. But essentially, it's just a bunch of, say, mini disturbances that are rotating around this lower pressure here. So as they rotate and as you get more and more of these, they can spawn tropical systems. And I think that's what's going to happen as these continue lifting west, northwestward over the Yucatan and eventually possibly getting into the Gulf of Mexico late this weekend and to early next week, getting close to the coast again with some sort of tropical entity. So moving ahead, another thing that I look at is the MJO, which is your Madden-Julie oscillation. So you can definitely see here's in the green shaded area, this is your what they call enhanced phase or the positive phase. Whenever you're in that environment, which is where we are now, you have a lot of upward rising motion air, and then it's a lot more favorable for thunderstorms to form and possibly tropical entities. But as it goes into a suppressed phase, you have a lot of sinking air when it's, dry outside, when the sun's out, there's not a cloud in the sky. That's a lot of high pressure sinking air, very difficult terrain in that environment. And so, but right now we're in that green shaded area. So as this enhanced phase moves over the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic or get into the Caribbean, there's an increased probability of being into an active phase for several weeks is what we are in currently right now, essentially from August the 10th time frame. So the MJO is not only increases the rainfall during these enhanced phases, but it also decreases the wind shear. So wind shear is as storms start to rise, it doesn't have higher upper level winds to shear the tops of them. They can continue to rise, so it remains closed or remains together and has a higher probability of continuing to form. So both of these factors allow existing tropical storms and hurricanes to strengthen, but as well as other little tropical waves that can fester and organize over time. So whenever it's an enhanced phase or this green shaded area, there is a 5-time more probability likelihood for it to develop into a major hurricane, and a 4 times more likelihood that to develop in a hurricane. So that's why we saw Grace. That's why we saw Ida forming into major hurricanes, because we're in an enhanced phase. It was a little more higher probability for that to happen. So here is the MJO going forward and where we are currently right now. This is a map from August the 30th to September the 13th. You can look at the green shaded area here. This is where the MJO is coming out of phase 2, going into phase 3, and then eventually goes into phase 4, probably sometime in that September the 8th, September the 9th time frame, and then it would continue moving off into 4 and eventually 5. So right now, the MJO circulates around the Earth every 46 days. And so this is what the phases mean. So when we're into an active phase, currently where we are now, that's depicted of these orange shaded areas right here. This is active phase 2 and active phase 3, where we are right now. Where the orange shaded areas, that is your more favorable phase. That's where that enhanced phase, that more upward rising motion air. Look where the wave coming off of Africa goes into. A lot of deep reds. This is why the models have this exploding over that type of environment. But look, for the rest of the Caribbean and the Atlantic, this is the most favorable phase for tropical storm development. As we get out of phase 2 and 3, then we go into 4 and 5, a lot less favorable, but there's still favorable areas that has an enhancement out here where that tropical storm Larry will be, or if not hurricane. But we also have an area into the northwestern part of the Gulf of Mexico, right off the coast, that would be in phase 4. That's where we are heading into, again, around that September 8th, September 9th timeframe. But after that, we see we're going into 5, 6, 7, a lot less favorable, because it has a lot of blue showing up in the Atlantic and the Caribbean, as well as off the East Coast. So that is your suppressed phase, a lot less active phase. So it have a higher probability once we get past, say, like September the 10th time frame, we're going to go into a lull, right? So it's a higher probability that probably we won't have tropical development between while we're in phases 5, 6, and 7. But once we get towards the end of September, we go back into a little bit more favorable phase 8, 1, and 2. These orange shaded areas in the Gulf of Mexico along the coast here has a higher probability for tropical type storms to come back in that environment. So going ahead, another thing that I took a look at is the JMA model, which is your Japanese model. This comes out every Thursday. It only comes out actually once a week. But back on August the 25th, we had a lot of blue shaded areas. That is that upward rising motion air. The orange is your sinking air. So where's the most active air? Right over the Caribbean, right over the Atlantic, and that's why we had those tropical systems. But going forward, this is day 10, day 16. We don't have the blue here anymore, but it's neutral. So we're still could see some sort of tropical development, but we're going out of it. So this is September, this would be, that first week of September going through about September the 10th timeframe. But after that, a lot of the oranges come back during that September timeframe when we go back into a suppressed phase of the MJO. But another thing we look at is Kelvin waves. Now, this is kind of a mini version of the MJO. So in layman's terms, all this really is just an area of deep tropical moisture. So we talked about this area that was over the Australia, about 10 days ago, if you follow me, say, hey, there's a probability as these waves come across and as they move eastward, it's going to be over the Atlantic around that September 1st time frame. So this is where we are now. This is where the map was on August the 30th. Look at the dark blues. The darker the blue, the more enhanced phase, the more tropical moisture it has to work with. That active wave, this is the coast of Africa, that's coming off the coast of Africa. It goes into that Kelvin wave type environment, and that's why it has the models exploding into a hurricane or possibly a major hurricane. But we also have blues into the Caribbean as well as the Gulf of Mexico, but not as deep. So I'm not expecting a major hurricane that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, but it could form into at least a tropical type entity during that, that first week of September time frame. So let's look back at where we've been. So here's the storm so far. We're all the way up to Julian. Julian came and went to extratropical, right? But let's take you back to Elsa, right? Remember Elsa made landfall back on July the 6th? So after that, we had a lull for about 5 or 6 weeks. We were moving out of active phase 2. We went into those suppressed phases. But we said, hey, look at the time frame of going to Grace as well as Ida. Ironically, Elsa made landfall July the 6th. Grace made landfall on August the 21st. Doing the math, 46 days, right? Exactly 46 days. Ida coming out beginning of phase 2, Grace going into end of phase 2, Ida, August the 29th. So going forward, the probability of us being to active phase 2 again is around October 6th to that October 13th time frame. So the higher probability of us having a hurricane 4 to 5 times more likely during that time frame going ahead. So go ahead and write that down. October 6th to October 13th time frame. So this is where we are currently. This is the average hurricanes or tropical storms that we typically get on a yearly basis, which is right around 14. And this is where the predictions were at last count. So look at NOAA back on August the 4th. This was their last tropical prediction. They had all the way up from 15 to 21 named storms. So right now we're 11. This is August 31st. We still have another 3 months of tropical hurricane season, because it goes all the way through November the 30th. So yes, we're more than halfway there from the highest prediction that's available, and we're going into the most active time frame of tropical season, which the peak season is September the 10th. So your highest months are September and October, and then it typically kind of fades down as we go into November. So moving ahead, let's take a look at what we have. So here's Ida, that's currently going to be moving inland, dumping some very heavy rain. There's Tropical Storm Kate. Now, Kate is not going to be a threat to any land whatsoever, but we have a very impressive active wave that's coming off the coast of Africa that's going to tap into that Kelvin wave type of environment. Still in a favorable phase, so it's expected to really, develop into a hurricane, if not a major hurricane, Hurricane Larry. And then we also have that Central American gyra activity down here in the Caribbean. Right now, the National Hurricane Center has a 20% chance of development over the next 5 days. It's slow to develop, right? But as this continues moving into a west-northwest trajectory, it goes into to the Gulf of Mexico and goes into a little bit more favorable environment. So here's the model. So right now, this is labeled Invest 90L. So they're all labeled in Invest because once you have some sort of tropical type wave, when winds are less than 35 miles an hour or tropical depression criteria, it's labeled in Invest before it reaches a tropical depression. Once it reaches 40 miles an hour, it will be named, the Invest 90L will go away, but will be named Tropical Storm Larry by that time frame as this is moving forward, and it goes into a very favorable environment. And a lot of the models are indicating a hurricane, if not a major hurricane, even 5 days from now, right? So it's not even named yet. So, right. And so going ahead, look at the probability of this Central American gyro location over the next several days increases. So by Friday, we could be looking at, even with the latest EPS guidance, has a 70-80% probability of it trying to kind of get its act together and possibly forming into a tropical depression by then, as this continues lifting off into the west northwestward. And here, take a look at this. As this continues moving into the northwest trajectory, as we go into as we're coming out of MJO3, going into 4, where was 4? Where was that orange shaded area? Right off the northwest coast of the Gulf of Mexico. And look, of the latest European model, by September the 8th, this actually fits the phase 4 criteria. So there's no question. Yeah, this is why the model is showing we could have a tropical type system right off here, the northwestern Gulf of Mexico, on the European as well as the Canadian. This is both of the operational runs this morning, the same time frame, September the 8th. And looking ahead, this is the Ensemble member guidance. So the European model has, like, say, 51 Ensemble members to work with. And so it's almost a guarantee a lot of these congealed together, right? Of saying, hey, we have a very high probability of this actually forming into a hurricane, if not a major hurricane, out here in the middle of the Atlantic. Larry is going to be one of those storms that's going to be around a while, right? It's going to be around a long time. It's probably going to get named tomorrow, and we're going to be hearing about Larry for a week, if not 10 days. So Larry is going to be a hurricane or a major hurricane, but the good thing is it's going to be out in the middle of the Atlantic. And there's a lot of indications this continues lifting off out open to sea, but it's not 100% ruled out that it can't continue westward over time. So we're almost there, but we're not 100% can't rule that out just yet. But what we're more concerned about, which will probably be, if it gets named, Mindy out here in the Gulf of Mexico, because we're, yes, during that September the 7th timeframe, we have a lot more Ensemble members starting to show up along the coast here, fitting that phase, going into phase 3, going into the active phase 4 along the northwestern Gulf. And the GFS model is even more bullish, with a lot more Ensemble members popping up. They have 35 Ensemble members. So when you have more than 40%, if not almost half, that increases the probability for it to occur into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're already seeing a lot of signs in the MJO, the Kelvin wave, all this is kind of coming together and say, hey, we could have another storm into the Gulf of Mexico as we get into that September the 7th, September the 8th time frame. And let's take you back. Another thing I look at is the precipitable water index. So here's where we are currently right now on a Tuesday, August 31st. Right now, it's just an area of disturbed weather. You have these mini disturbances. The darker the color, the more precipitable water values, the water contents available in the atmosphere. So a lot of the reds are implying, hey, this could get up to 2-inch per hour rainfall rates down here into Central America. But as we go forward, it has a lot more deep tropical moisture. A lot of these mini disturbances trying to get its act together. So this is by Thursday, September the 2nd. So then now you have purples start to show up. So that's indicative of a strengthening system over time as we move ahead. September the 5th timeframe, it'll be over the Yucatan Peninsula by then, going into the Gulf of Mexico by late this weekend. And then moving ahead, again, that 7th, that 8th timeframe, we've got a lot of purples showing up. That's a lot of deep tropical moisture again, going back into the northwestern parts of the Gulf of Mexico. Fits phase 4, exactly where we're going to be. And then enhanced phase, and then getting closer to development along the coast. I know this is the last thing you want to look at, especially with Ida just making landfall. But yes, a lot of the probabilities starting to come together that we could have an increased rain threat as we go into that September 7th and September 8th timeframe, if not a tropical system that we could be dealing with by then. So over the next 7 days, yes, this will be slow to development. This is between now and September the 6th of this Central American gyro activity out here into the Caribbean. But as it gets closer, You have a lot more deep tropical moisture to work with. So we have a lot of heavy rain showing up by the time it actually gets into the Yucatan. And then it'll start spreading out into the Gulf of Mexico by the time we get in that late Sunday, going into that Monday timeframe. But closer in, let's take a look at what's happening on land, because I'm definitely getting a lot more concerned about an extremely heavy rainfall event setting up over the next day or two. So here's the latest SRFEF model. I use this a lot. This is your shorter range, high resolution guidance. So these are all your kind of an ensemble member guidance of the short range, high resolution models, and saying, hey, on top of the deep moisture that we're working with Ida, still pulling in moisture from the Gulf, combined with that frontal boundary. A lot of the indications has this merging together. Right now, this area has a moderate risk for excessive rainfall. There is a possibility the Weather Prediction Center could bump this up to a high risk event. So that is definitely concerning. There's a lot of indications that are starting to come together. We could be looking at a serious flash flood threat right here, portions of West Virginia, especially going into southern PA and eastern PA. We're talking the potential of double-digit rainfall, even the potential of another possibility of an west Tennessee type of event that they had several weeks ago with these training rain bands setting up for an extended period of time. We could be looking at in this area right here where this possibility could be bumping up to a high risk tomorrow of 12, 14, 16 inches of isolated spots is not out of the question. So I'm deeply concerned about a very heavy rain threat and even possibility of flash flood emergencies happening in this area of the country. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that as all this is starting to come together of a possibility of a very heavy excessive rainfall threat in this area late today, especially as we go into the day on a Wednesday. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. I know we covered a lot today, so I wanted to get this out and kind of explain some of the terminology in use and some of the ways that I predict weather systems and going ahead. So if you did find value in this video, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and come back on a daily basis to hear all my latest updates where I protect you before and after the storm.